What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be fine-tuning my rigid 3650 saw. I got this thing about a year ago, and honestly it's just been sitting over in my corner, kind of buried by stuff, but I decided I needed to get this out because I've got several big woodworking projects coming up and I'm going to need a reliable table saw, which is the whole reason I bought this thing. But I got on YouTube and I was looking to see if anyone had like a tune-up video out there about this saw, and I didn't see any that were specific to this saw. Now, most of these things we're going to go over are probably very similar on every saw, but mainly what I want to focus on is whether or not the blade is parallel to the miter tracks. These miter slots here, you want your blade to be as close to parallel as you can get it. And actually, if it's going to be out of parallel, it needs to be out of parallel this way, because most of the time you use the fence on this side of the blade. And what can happen if it's out of parallel this way is it creates a pinching situation as you're pushing wood through, and that can bog your motor down. It can actually get to a point where it's dangerous. So if it's going to be out of parallel, you want it to be out parallel this way from the fence. That way, it releases on the back end. That way it's not getting pinched down here. Hopefully that makes sense to you. But there are several ways to test that, and we're going to go over a couple of those today. To tune a saw up like this, you're going to need a really good straight edge. And I've just got this one here, and we're going to be testing to see if the wings are perfectly parallel or as close as we can get them. The extension wings on this saw, they're cast iron, but no matter what material they're made out of, you want them to be as close to parallel to the cast iron top as you can get it. So parallel is the name of the game. Also, the same thing here with this throat plate. I've noticed, and I'll show you right quick with this piece of paper. I mean, it just goes through there easily. So a piece of paper is a nice thing to have around. You can also use a flashlight and shoot light at it from the backside, and you can usually see the light coming under the gap, and that'll help you to get everything as flat and parallel to the surface of the cast iron as you possibly can. That way, when you're pushing boards through, you won't feel this little divot down here. And I'm a little bit worried. In the manual, it says, be careful not to over tighten this. And I feel like I'm feeling a little bit of a dip right there. So I may have to figure out how I can either flatten that out or whatever, but they tell you in the manual that basically you're supposed to adjust these first. There's 4 little Allen screws there, and then snug this up, not over tighten it, because if you over tighten this piece with no support down below it, you can actually bend the front of this throat plate. So I'm hoping that the previous owner didn't do that. But we're going to be checking all of that stuff. We're going to need a good carpenter square, and I've also got another one that's off camera. It's one of those speed squares. We're going to be checking to see if the blade is at perfect 90 degrees whenever it says it is on the dial. We're also going to check 45. So let's get into this. I wanted to make this video for a while. I just haven't had time to get into it. We're also going to be adjusting the fence, or at least checking to make sure that when we lock the fence down, it's parallel to the miter slots and hence the blade. So we're going to be going over that. I looked and I saw several videos on the model that comes after this saw. I think it's like a 4512 if I'm not mistaken. This one is model 3650. The motor still sticks out of the back of this saw, which I personally prefer that because it's more user-friendly for a DIY person like myself. So if I have a problem with the motor, I can go get a new motor or rebuild this one or whatever. Or if the belt goes out, I can change that. I think the newer machines, I'm not sure that they're direct drive, but definitely the motor is inside the cabinet instead of hanging out the back like this. In that way, this one's a little bit more old school. But I really love this saw, and I want it to be as precise as I can possibly make it, with keeping in mind that if it's out just a tiny bit this way, like that, I'm exaggerating to show you. If this blade is out just a tiny hair this way, that's actually okay. They say 15 thousandths of an inch, I believe. But we'll be going through the manual here and looking at what they say and trying to get this thing set up to where it's as precise of a cut as I can possibly make. All right, I guess it really doesn't matter which order you do this in, but the first thing I'm going to do is check the extension wings, because again, I didn't assemble this thing. And I've noticed something already. Your hand, just like when you're doing auto body work and stuff, when you're feeling for imperfections, your hand is very sensitive. And honestly, I can already tell that I'm a little bit high here on this side and a little bit low here, but I can't change the angle of the cast iron, the solid cast iron plate here, but I might be able to move this down. Now the problem is that when I get over here, I feel that the cast iron table is a little bit higher. This part is a little bit higher than the extension wing. So we're gonna, you know, there's a point where this stuff is only so flat because, you know, I mean, it is precise, but it's only so precise, and, you know, weather changes things, everything changes things. Shipping this thing across, you know, over the Pacific Ocean or whatever to come in to, you know, from China or wherever it's coming from, right? I mean, things can happen in shipping. These plates can get a little bit out of whack, you know. Maybe the thing was built on a Monday or a Friday, who knows? But I can tell that this plate here is not the same level as this plate here. Now, one thing I want to make sure and caution you of is start at the front here, but put the majority of your straight edge on the piece that you're trying to match up to. So in this case, we can't change the surface of this cast iron center part, but we can change the extension wings. So I'm going to take a piece of paper with a nice sharp edge on it like that, and I can slip that under there easily, right there in that spot. So it totally needs an adjustment right there. But right here, it does not fit at all. Actually, it fits in slightly. Yeah, it's still stiff, but it fits in just like I said. So my finger told me. Oftentimes your hand can tell you more than your eye can if you just reach out and feel it. And I've got a similar thing going on. Back here in the back corner, it feels a little bit higher on the wing side. So I'm going to take my piece of paper. Actually, it's perfectly flat there. That's acceptable. That's fine. It still feels a little bit proud right there, but according to the paper technique here, it's good to go. And you can't see this on the camera because of the way I have it set up, but I'm kind of putting my ruler over where the bolts are. So there's one bolt underneath the table here, and that one's good. We're going to check this one next. There's one here, and then there's one at the front. So you have 4 bolts down there for adjusting. And let's take a look at this. Same deal, it's a little low there. It's good on this side, but just on this side right here, it's a little bit low. And there may be some imperfections that we're just not able to adjust out. But I'm happy with where it is on the front and the back. We're going to go down here and see if we can look up in here. It's pretty dark, but there are 4 bolts. There's one there, one here, and one here. And what I'm going to attempt to do is just loosen the 2 middle bolts here and see if we can't flatten that out a little more and make it a little better. I don't think it's going to be perfect no matter what we try, but we can get as close as we possibly can. So I'm just going to loosen the 2 center bolts here right quick and see, and that's a 12 millimeter by the way, although probably a 1/2 inch would work as well. And I'm watching it as I'm doing it to see if it actually moves, and it didn't move. So what I may be able to do, I'm hoping, and I've just got them finger tight now to where they're loose enough that I should be able to get some movement out of this thing. I'm hoping that I'll be able to take a C-clamp like this Perfect, yes. I could see it moving with my eye. When I was looking at it from the side, I could see it moving. So that actually pulled it up quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and snug that up. So even though it's cast iron, there is a tiny little bit of flex to it that you can get out of it if you need to adjust it. So make sure and don't suffer through that if you don't have to. You know, fix it up and make it as good as you possibly can. At least that's my philosophy. So, all right, right, we're going to tighten that up pretty good. And I can still see that it's a little proud on this side, a little low over here. So we're going to move our C-clamp down. The true test is when I take the C-clamp off, does it go back? Oh no, that's buttery smooth. Buttery smooth. All right, so let's try this one. And one thing I want to make sure of is I'm not getting in the way of the bolts. I need to be able to tighten them up. So what that C-clamp is doing is pulling up on the bottom side of this cast iron and bringing it level to that surface right there. And that feels much better. So we're going to tighten that down. And then we're going to repeat the process on the other wing. This saw, one of the reasons I love it is it has 2 cast iron wings. Yeah, that makes it more heavy, but I just love the cast iron. I think it's good. I think it's a better material than what you're going to get with a stamped metal one. And again, you know, I'm not a professional cabinet builder or anything like that, but when I do my DIY projects, I want them to be as precise as I can possibly get them. I can tell you, by hand, it feels a whole lot better. It feels a whole lot better. So I'm excited about this. I kind of geek out on stuff like this, so I thought I'd bring you guys along for the journey. It's not going to be a quick video because we're going to have to go through a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Now my corner's a little bent, so we'll get that flat again. Hopefully you guys can see that. That paper will not slide even when I'm going at the going through the hole here, the center part. If I tilt it back, yeah, if I tilt the ruler back, I can get it to go under, but that's really good. Oh man, I love that. Don't you love it when a plan comes together? That is awesome. All right, now we're going to adjust this throat plate here. I can see that it's off. I can feel that it's off over here. I already loosened this screw up, just a standard Phillips head screw. But we're going to go ahead and take our straight edge. It looks really pretty good back here. If anything, it's a little high on this side. So I'm going to take my Allen wrench and adjust that down just a hair. It's definitely better. And so I think the biggest change is going to be up here in the front. I'm just looking in that gap right there to see which side needs to come up. This side, it looks like both sides need to come up a little bit. Might have been a hair too far. See, I'm looking for perfectly flush. I don't want it to be high or low to the table here. That side feels good. Now there's still a little difference right there, but I don't think it's going to matter. Off camera, I put the bottom portion of this in my vise with a rag wrapped around it, and I tried to kind of bend it and persuade it back to perfectly flat, but I was afraid I'd bend this upper part here because I didn't have a lot of leverage on it. So a lot of times you have to get to a point where it's a compromise. And eventually in the future, I plan on making a zero clearance plate for this. And again, that's another place where there's no videos about it, at least about this particular model. And there's enough differences that that kind of matters. So I'm just going to feel it. It feels good. And just for grins, we're going to check it front to back as well. And maybe diagonally would be a better way. I think that's the spot we're going to have to compromise on, but it does feel better. Feel no edge at the back. A slight little dip here at the front. Trying to think how else I could bend that, because I don't want to bend the whole thing. And when I put it in my vise, I couldn't really get down low enough to get leverage on it. So I probably could have put it in the vise the other way and maybe smacked it with a rubber mallet the other, a couple of times. But if you're going to do that, proceed with caution, because you get to a point with bending this kind of metal. Let me show you the bottom of it. It has all this stuff down here. So it's obviously a piece of cast metal, and you can only bend this stuff so far. This is the point in question right down here. When I'm looking at that with my naked eye, I can see that it drops off a little bit. Let's do it this way. I don't know if you guys will be able to pick that up or not, but there's a pretty good gap down there. And so I suspect that the previous owner over tightened this and bent that down, and I may have to try the rubber mallet technique or just not worry about it until I build myself a zero clearance insert for this. But for now, we're going to call that good. It's flat everywhere else. If I raise it up here, then it'll be too proud here. So sometimes you have to reach a point of compromise, and that's what we're going to settle for here. I like perfection, but you can go crazy chasing it as well. So just be aware of that. And when we put this bolt in here, the screw, we're just going to snug it up. We're not going to go crazy with it. I saw someone online that was selling zero clearance inserts for this model saw, and you just bought the thing. And so yeah, we're just going to snug that up just like that. And yeah, I feel that dip right there, but I don't think that'll be a problem. I'm trying to think what else I could do. I was just thinking if I put a washer underneath this, that would raise it up, but the problem is it would raise it up all the way across the board. So I think I'm just going to have to settle for that for now until I get my zero clearance. And then when we get that set up, it will be perfectly flush because it'll be custom made to this opening. All right. Next up, we got to raise the blade up. You guys can't see it because it's off camera, but down below I have my dial set on 0, or does it say 90? I think it says 0. Yes, it says 0, meaning this should be straight up and down, a perfect 90 to the table. So we're going to grab our little carpenter square here, and we're going to pick a spot in between the blades. This was something I didn't know until I just picked it up. I don't remember if my father-in-law or somebody told me about this, that you don't go to the blade, because when you go to the blade, that throws a big gap, obviously. You want to go in between the teeth, is what I should say. You want to go to the edge of to the side of the blade right here, but in between the teeth. And then we're going to do the same technique where we squint really hard and look down there. And again, making sure to stay between the between the saw teeth. I mean, that's perfect. Since we're here, I'm going to go ahead and check this side as well. And again, that's perfect. I couldn't adjust this any better. But if I did have to adjust it, there are 2 Allen screws down in here. These are your stops. So when it's perfectly 90 degrees, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe this one is the stop for 90 degrees or 0 on your gauge down below. All right, the quick and easy way to check this is, again, making sure you're going in between the teeth. You guys aren't going to be able to see it very well, but at least from that angle, let me see if I can get you a better shot right here. I'm seeing no gap, so that's what I want to see. It's perfect. So we're not going to adjust that, but one of these adjusts the 45. Actually, I think I told you backwards because of the way the blade tilts. This one is the stop for the 45. So when you have it set at 45, this is the stop. If you were out of adjustment, you could make an adjustment here. If your dial was out of whack and maybe your dial was not lining up with the 45, just like that, there's a little screw in there. I can't show you because you'd have to actually take the knob off to do this, but there's a little screw in there to where you can adjust that pointer. Hopefully you can see that. Can't tell if you guys can see that or not. Let's get some more light on the subject. That will help. There's a screw on there. Maybe you could get a little short stubby in there, or maybe if you turn this knob to the right angle, you'd probably be able to get your screwdriver through there. But anyway, you can make an adjustment right here on this pointer if it's off down here. Or you can actually move the whole dial. It moves up and down. But mine is actually perfectly on 45, and I want to leave it there because I don't want to be adjusting stuff that doesn't need to be adjusted. But if you had to make that adjustment, that's how you would go about it. You'd either have to set your stop up here, which I believe is this right one, to get that to where it lands at 45, and then adjust your dial accordingly. All right, we're going to get you lined up perfectly with that miter slot there, and we're just going to bring our fence over. Until we're touching. We're going to use our straight edge. Come right up to it. And then we're going to clamp down. And we're going to inspect everything. It's a little proud back here on this back end. Right there. So it needs, the whole thing needs to come like this up here at the front. All right, to adjust our fence here, I think we're going to take that loose and loosen up these 4 hex head bolts here. All right. See that? The whole thing moves separate from that other piece. So that's what we're trying to achieve, is to get this lined up. Get it lined up with that miter slot, and then tighten it down. It still needs a little bit more. I think this time I'm going to just do it by feel. Okay, we'll slide that over, touch it in the back. Okay, I'm kind of putting some downward pressure on it, so hopefully it won't move. It feels a lot better. So now I should be able to come away like that and clamp it anywhere, and it should maintain a consistent distance from that miter slot on the front and the back. So let's go over to 6. Okay, I'd call that 6, right on that line right there. Can't really flip it up because I've got stuff in the way back here. Here we go. It's on the 6 there. On the 6 there. So I should be able to move back in to that miter slot, get it even, clamp down, and now I should be able to feel it, and it does. It feels perfect all the way across there. So we now have our fence set parallel to the miter slot, which we're fixing to find out if that's parallel to the blade or not. And what you do is you mark the blade. I've got it marked here with some red. You know, mark one tooth on the blade and run back to a fixed position like this miter slot. And then we're going to run that guy out. And I can see right here on my line, it's right on the 12 there. So I'm going to tighten it down and make sure it doesn't move. Right on the 12, and we're going to check it again. And make sure you hold it at the same position every time. So I'm on it right there. I feel it rubbing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to spin this tooth around to the back edge, and we're going to put this in and see where we land. And just by doing it like that, it feels pretty close. Right there, it feels pretty close. But it's clearly dragging there. And I can see a little bit of a gap there. So that tells me that the blade is already kicked out this way just a little bit. So that's one way to do it, and that's what the manual says, and that may be good enough. But I came up with this apparatus here where I've got a gauge mounted on here. A dial caliper is mounted on here onto my T-track here. So I can run this through and actually get a precise reading of what this thing is doing. So let's get back to that red tooth. Where is it? There it is. So again, I'm just going to line up my red tooth. Making sure that I zero out my gauge. In fact, let me turn this around so you guys can see it better. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using the miter slot and the miter gauge in conjunction with a 2x4 and my dial indicator so we can figure out which way this thing is out of whack. Because I can tell it's out just a little bit, but I'm not exactly sure which way. We would rather it be this way a little bit than that way. If it's going that way a little bit, that's going to create a potential pinching situation on our fence when we're using that. So I've got it right on, oh, it fell through. You got to be careful about that. And I want to go to the same place on both sides. It's not really going to matter what the dial does in the middle because I'm not counting on the accuracy of the precision of this blade all across the surface. See, let me show you. So that's just doing it that way. That's 12 or 13 thousandths off, and it looks like it's going that way to me. So I need to go the other direction, but let's check it with the, let's go back to 0. Zero it out there, and now we're going to rotate the red tooth back around until it lines up. And yeah, we're 14 or 15 thousandths off, and it's going backwards. So the gauge is going backwards, meaning that if it was going this way, then that would mean that the blade was twisted this way, but it's not. It's twisted the other way. So it's creating a potential pinching situation as I'm feeding boards through there. So what that means is I'm going to have to do a minor adjustment. Honestly, the manual says 15 thousandths is okay, but again, I'd rather it be closer, you know, to 5 or maybe no more than 10 thousandths off in the other direction. So I'd rather it go this way if it's going to be out. I'd rather the blade be out this direction, because keep in mind, we're at the back of the saw looking forward here. So next up, we're going to have to get some lights set up for me to show you this next part, because it's not going to be super easy for me to film this. But there are 3 bolts back here. Let's see. There's one right there. Another one on the opposite side right there. And one right in the middle. And they call this one here your micro adjust. So you can see it's got a little lever on it where you can adjust this. And what this does is it takes the entire the motor and the saw blade, you know, the gear drive mechanism, everything that works to turn this saw blade is attached by 6 points on the bottom of the cast iron table. So there's 3 that are easy to get to here in the back, and then there's 3 that are a nightmare to get to way up in the front. And there's no way I'm going to be able to point to that, but at least it's my understanding from reading the manual that the only way to adjust this is to loosen all of them and then make adjustments with this little micro lever thing here that kind of moves it back and forth. All right, we're obviously at the back of the saw here. I got in here with my 9/16, which is what it was, and these were already kind of loose. I mean, they weren't totally loose, but I didn't have to try very hard to break them loose. So Now what we have here is our dial indicator is set up at 0 down there. And we're just going to run one more measurement right quick. Okay, so you can see we're still about, I don't know, I'd say 12 to 14 thousandths off below 0. So once all 3 of your screws are loose, this one here has a screw or a nut. This one here has a bolt also that you have to loosen up, but this is the one that you can make the adjustment with. So let's watch the dial indicator. Okay, so as I pull this that direction to my left, hopefully you can see both things there. You can see the dial indicator moving. Okay, so right now I'm just going to run up to 0 and see what happens. Okay, we're back on 0, and I did not loosen up the front ones, because if the back ones were that loose, the front ones probably are as well. So let's move this back and see if we're still at 0 on this end. Okay, we're a little positive there. And I got to be careful where I touch this thing, because it's not super precise as far as how it lays in the track. In other words, I can get a little movement out of this gauge if I'm pushing down on different places, so I have to be wary of that, or be careful of that, so that I'm not getting a false reading. So we're 3 thousandths below, or 2 thousandths below 0, which honestly, that's a heck of a lot better than what it was just a minute ago. It's still on 0 there. And we're on minus 2 thousandths. So it's still going that way, just the slightest bit. So let's bump it up a little more. I'll go a little beyond 0. Okay. Put our dial indicator back to 0, and we'll rotate this around to 0. And just check it again. Okay, 0. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so now that's showing 5 thousandths, or not quite, about 4 thousandths that way. I'm going to back off just a hair. Let's say 2 thousandths, and leave that right there. Return to 0. And back to about 2 thousandths. I could probably get it to stay at 0 for the most part. Let's see if we can get to 1 thousandths. Because the thing is I want it to be as accurate as it possibly can be. For it, it puts less load on the saw and on the motor. So see, I'm getting a little bit of movement when I tap down on it, And we're going to call that one, just drop tools everywhere. We're going to call that 1.5 thousandths. So let's move back and see if that measures consistently 2 times in a row. Back to 0. Okay, that's looking good. And that's showing 1 thousandths. Let's do it one more time. Again, you can drive yourself mad trying to get perfect. That's 1 thousandths, and it's off this direction. So that's what I like. That's what I want. So that way, if there's not going to be any pinch. The front edge of the blade, as you're feeding it in, is going to be 1 thousandth of an inch closer to the fence than it is on the rear edge of the blade. So we're going to leave that right there. And the last thing for me to do, and I'm not going to bore you guys with this, but the last thing for me to do, you can see how much I moved that lever. I need to tighten this bolt up and these 2 in the back, and then I'm going to try to get up in the front and snug those down, because I didn't even loosen the front ones up. So I suspect that they're probably already either loose or just snugged up. They're not really tight, and I want this thing to hold its 0. Now that we've got it all dialed in, I want it to hold that 0. So guys, I know this has kind of been a long one, and maybe I'm not the most efficient guy at doing this process, because I've only done this one other time and it was on a completely different type of saw. But I'm really happy with this rigid 3650 table saw, and I want to be able to do lots and lots of glue ups in the future without having, imperfections or having my cut not be perfectly true. So we've done a heck of a job, I think, getting that to within 1 thousandth of an inch, at least according to my, kind of semi-hokey setup here. You can actually buy some that actually lock in to the miter slot a lot better than what I've got here. But this is good enough as long as you're patient with it and you're not pushing down on the side of the board like this, causing it to go off. You should be good. So guys, I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know down in the comments if you have a 3650 saw and what you think about it. Let us know some of the big projects you've done on it, or maybe some of the really fine woodworking you've done on it and what its capabilities are. I always love reading your comments. I appreciate you guys stopping by and tuning in. And until then, we'll see you next time.